So I notice I seem to have gone over my 2 video idea. Most regretful, but again, it's Final Fantasy VI, and there's more to say. I really could say more about Kefka, but I'm sure you're tired of hearing me yak about him, so let me talk about the game itself a bit more. FF6 did a lot of things that they'd never done before. Have never done since, I might add. One of the biggest things that people tend to point out is it was the first attempt, only attempt, to broach East and West RPG ideas. What I mean by that is most Eastern RPGs are very linear by design. It's supposed to be a story you're participating in, right? I like that, don't get me wrong. But when you hit the world of Ruin, what you essentially have as of that point, as soon as you get the airship, is a sandbox, like a Western RPG. And at that point in time, you're actually doing your own thing at your own pace with your own level. If you really wanted to, you could go from the airship to the last dungeon and say, "Hey, Kefka! Oh God!" Unless you're really leveled up or really know what you're doing, or were tassing. But you get the idea. Now, on top of that, they did the sandbox concept properly. Now, I will admit I tend to prefer being dropped into an open sandbox and being told to go. I like that. But I will still admit that I prefer some guidance, because even in such a situation, what I tend to do is go to the nearest town, or pull up a walkthrough, or a wiki, or whatever. Something to give me something to start on. When the game gives you that something to start on, the breadcrumbs, that's a good thing. That means they have taken that step for you. They have not gone to the extreme of just plopping you in a world and saying, go. Now, the other extreme, which is, like, I hate to call it out, but Final Fantasy 13, where you're being led around by the nose the whole time, that's also no good, and I can't stand it when a game does that, because I love having the freedom of movement, freedom to be able to do whatever I want. And FF6 hit a nice balance between that, because what happens is you get the airship and the music, oh god, the music, fires up, and for the first time you start to feel the stirrings of hope, and that maybe we can actually pull this off. And you see a bird flying by. And you're like, well, that's a courier pigeon. And you follow it, and the way the game does this is it takes control of the airship for 10-15 seconds and steers it towards where the bird went, to where it landed. And then you have control. You can do whatever. You can go right to the last dungeon, like I just said, from that point. But it gives you that breadcrumb. And if you chose to, you could go ahead and land in that town and explore and talk to the NPCs and find out what's going on, and then you'll see another bird go to another town, and go to there, and then go through that dungeon and get that character, and he'll mention something about another character over here, and if you go over here and get him, then you'll find out about another plot through it after finishing that dungeon. And in all honesty, the breadcrumbs basically stop there, because once you've gotten Shadow and or Realm, there's no real guidance from those points to keep going, but that's still a nice starting point, isn't it? And you've got plenty of other places to explore. You have to go back and visit Terra. You've got to go, you've got to go back and talk with Sid again, and figure out what's going on with him, assuming you saved his life. I would hope you did, and if you didn't, may you burn in hell. But you get the idea. There was a breadcrumb, and it wasn't too much. It wasn't leading you around by the nose, but it wasn't too little either. It wasn't just, here's the airship, and go. Beautifully done, perfectly done, exactly how it should be. And another thing FF6 did, that they never did prior to that, was there is no main character. Now, FF7, not to speak ill of it, is probably the worst example of this. There are 2, I believe, sections of the game. Let me think about that for a moment. Yeah, 2 sections of the game where you do not have Cloud in your party. Cloud is without question the main character, and it's enforced in gameplay terms, as I just mentioned. The story is about him. Everything that's going on is about him. He is the most developed. He is the one who has the most going on. He is the one who has the most vested personal interest in what is happening to the world. The person least likely to turn away. And people these days tend to take that for granted, I'll admit. The concept that an ordinary person, a real person, if you could use such a word, would not just willingly charge headlong heroically into battle. They have their own concerns, they have their own weaknesses, they have their own flaws, and they have their own reasons they might stop and say, I can't do this anymore, and turn away. And Suikoden 2 had employed that, actually. There's a point at which you can literally quit the game by stopping the war. It's kind of funny, actually. And by stopping the war, I mean quitting. You decide, I'm not doing this anymore. Anyways, but I've derailed a bit, so forgive me, but FF6 has no main character. You can argue that there's a main character, And I've heard arguments for several characters, and the most obvious one is Terra, for the obvious reasons. She's the first person you see. She, again, probably has the most vested... Well, I'm even going to argue that, because she doesn't have the most vested interest in what's going on. She just has a powerfully vested interest in what's going on, just as several other characters do, and that's the point. It was an ensemble cast, in the same way that Babylon 5 and DS9 are superior to Star Trek Voyager and Star Trek Enterprise. That's unfair. But you get my idea. The ensemble cast thing, done properly, tends to make for a better story, because there is no main character. There is no one guy who's always there. There's no one girl who's always there. They're people. And all these people have their own stories, and their own ways, and their own reasons for being here. And you really start to care about them. And I know that I'm weird like that, because, I've played the game several times. I know how it works. I know how it ends. I know every inside and out of that game. But when I'm playing through it again, just like I was yesterday, I still care. I still care about these individuals, these fictional lives and their ways and goings, and what exactly happens to them. And I want them to have a happy ending. I want them to grow. I want to experience every inch of their lives. I want to rip every ounce of flavor out of every second of that game, and savor it and feel it, and as though it was real. And you can go ahead and make fun of me if you want for that. I don't care. Because that's the truth. A game like FF6, a game that truly makes me feel, really hits the mark in that sense. It makes me feel like this matters. And in a way it does. I say in a way because how many people really care about their hobbies, right? Most people, you would imagine. The cars, or maybe they like collecting something, or maybe something. Do they care about what they're doing? Yeah, it's just a hobby, but they say that sort of thing in order to be defensive, because they don't want people to think they're getting too serious. I have no such preconceptions here. I have no problem saying that, yes, I care about my hobby, yes, I care about gaming. It's called I'd Rather Be Gaming for a reason. I am a gamer. I have been since I was 4. And I have no difficulty in admitting that I truly get into my games, at least the good ones, the really good ones. The 0 category without question. And so, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to share about FF6, because it really is such a beautiful game. I recommend it to anybody, for any reason. I actually had one of my viewers ask me if I had a copy of FF6 lying around that I was willing to share. Unfortunately, I do not, because I still have my original SNES copy, which is, for lack of a better way to put this, enshrined, because I don't want anything bad to happen to it. And I still have my GBA copy, which I'm playing actively. So, no. So I told her, hey, I'll get you a ROM, maybe? Not that I advocate the cool crime of ROMing. But anyways, point being, FF6 was a thing of glory. The story... You know what, I didn't even really talk about the story last time, did I? It's kind of funny, too, because the story is, again, like Suikoden 2, rather complicated, rather difficult to summarize, because it's about war. Indirectly this time, as it usually is. It's about people. It's about character growth. It's about figuring out who you really are, or rather who the characters really are. Obviously, I'm not talking about you, the player. It's about learning and dealing and not being alone, as I mentioned earlier. Because let me give you a really brief synopsis of the plot. The Empire has decided to start using Magitech, a combination of magic and technology, in which makes things horrible, in an effort to bring about another War of the Magi, because the world had been destroyed 1,000 years prior by the Magi, which had decided to war against each other for reasons best left to them. The only reason they stopped is they realized they were literally destroying the planet, so they decided to seal themselves away, along with magic, in a different dimension. Of course, Geshtal, being the most evil character in the thing, says, "Screw all that! I want the world under my feet!" And goes after them, and the whole game is trying to stop him, and eventually Kefka, who succeeds where he doesn't. And whatnot. I don't really have anything else to add. I could keep going with the story, but I don't want this to be another 5-minute thing, so I'm going to go ahead and stop here.